Remy Ma warned everybody that every time her name got brought into this situation, she was going to respond, and then Claressa Shields walked into the middle of the storm anyway, stood next to Papoose while the entire internet was watching, and turned a messy relationship story into a boxing story, a rap story, and now a culture-wide argument about who is actually winning. But here is the part that almost everybody is missing. The biggest twist is not that Remy Ma released another diss record, and it is not even that Claressa answered back. The biggest twist is that both women may be fighting over the same headline while Papoose keeps moving through the chaos like the one person who benefits every time somebody else grabs a microphone. Because when you look at the public timeline, the story appears simple. Remy Ma is the legendary rapper. Claressa Shields is the undefeated champion boxer. Papoose is the husband caught between two powerful women. That is the version everybody understands. But the public record shows something much more complicated. There are reportedly leaked messages, public accusations, a divorce filing, interviews, diss tracks, boxing rivals appearing in a music video, tattoos, arena footage, and a fight where the opposing corner literally threw in the towel during the 6th round. One story is happening in the ring. Another story is happening online. And a third story is happening in the attention economy, where every insult becomes promotion, and every response becomes another reason for millions of people to keep watching. What looks like Claressa responding to Remy may actually be Claressa trying to protect her identity as a champion. What looks like Remy attacking Claressa may also be Remy refusing to let a painful personal chapter get rewritten by somebody else. And what looks like Papoose flip-flopping again may be the clearest sign that this entire situation is not really about one song, one interview, or one hat. It is about who gets to control the story after a long relationship changes, who gets to claim loyalty, and who gets to be remembered as the person who remained composed when everything around them became public. By the time we get to the fight footage, the wanna-go visual, the reported divorce timeline, and the way the media keeps packaging this conflict, you are going to understand why the most important person in this story might be the one trying hardest to look like he is simply standing beside somebody. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. To understand why this escalated, we have to go back to the beginning of the public explosion instead of starting with the latest clip. Reminisce Mackey, known professionally as Remy Ma, and Shamil Mackey, known as Papoose, built a public image around loyalty, survival, and partnership. They were not presented to the culture as a random celebrity couple. They were presented as two people who had endured pressure together, supported each other through difficult periods, and turned their relationship into part of their artistic identity. That matters because when a relationship like that begins to fracture in public, the audience does not see an ordinary breakup. The audience sees a collapse of a narrative they have been emotionally invested in for years. In December 2024, Hip Hop DX reported that Remy publicly accused Papoose of having an affair with Claressa Shields and shared screenshots that she presented as evidence. The messages were interpreted by fans as showing emotional closeness between Papoose and Shields, although the meaning and authenticity of those messages became part of the dispute. Shields reportedly denied that the screenshot represented what Remy claimed and responded publicly. Papoose then reportedly accused Remy of repeated infidelity and indicated that he wanted a divorce. Those are serious claims, and because they came from people involved in a relationship that had already become public, the responsible way to discuss them is to separate what was posted from what was proven. A post is confirmed as a post. An accusation is confirmed as an accusation. The underlying conduct remains alleged unless independently established. That distinction is important because the internet loves to remove the word allegedly the second a story becomes entertaining. Once the comments start moving, people treat captions like court documents and screenshots like final verdicts. But in this case, every person involved has a different incentive to frame the story in a way that protects their reputation. Remy has an incentive to explain why the marriage deteriorated. Papoose has an incentive to explain why he moved on. Claressa has an incentive to defend her name and make it clear that she is not defined by somebody else's marriage. The audience, meanwhile, wants a simple hero and a simple villain, even though the public information does not support a clean story with no gray areas. Then comes the second layer. Claressa Shields is not a random person entering a celebrity argument. She is a two-time Olympic gold medalist, a multi-division world champion, and an athlete whose professional identity is built on discipline, preparation, and competitive control. Her public image is not just the woman connected to Papoose. It is the champion who has spent years demanding respect for women's boxing. That is why every insult directed at her creates a second conflict. If she responds, critics say she is distracted. If she stays silent, critics say she is bothered. If she jokes, people say she is escalating. If she wins, people still search for the relationship drama inside the victory. Remy Ma, on the other hand, carries a different kind of authority. She is not new to rap conflict, public scrutiny, or the pressure that comes with being a woman in a male-dominated industry. Her voice has weight because she has already survived a career that went through major disruption and still returned to cultural relevance. So when she releases or teases music that fans interpret as targeting Claressa, the record does not land like a random social media rant. It lands like a veteran rapper choosing a weapon she understands. The question is not whether Remy knows how to create attention. The question is whether this particular conflict gives her control of the narrative or keeps her trapped inside somebody else's storyline. And then there is Papoose, the man at the center of the entire storm. He has his own rap legacy, his own relationships in the industry, and his own public history with Remy. But the more visible he becomes beside Claressa, the more the audience asks whether he is acting with consistency. A birthday message, a public appearance, an arena entrance, a tattoo, a media interview, or a piece of clothing can all be interpreted as a declaration. In ordinary life, wearing a hat is wearing a hat. In a public breakup where every symbol is being examined, a hat becomes evidence in the court of social media. The stakes are musical because diss tracks turn private pain into public material. They're cultural because the audience has to decide whether an accomplished woman should be judged by her response to a rival or by the work she built before the conflict. They're financial because every clip, interview, song, and viral post can create streams, bookings, subscriptions, and renewed attention. And they are reputational because once the internet decides somebody is the problem, every future action gets interpreted through that label. So the real question is not simply whether Claressa responded after Remy warned her. The real question is why every new move seems to pull the women deeper into a public rivalry, while Papoose keeps appearing at the exact moments when the story becomes impossible to ignore. The first thing everybody saw was the fight. On August 15, 2026, Claressa Shields faced Kay Scott at State Farm Arena in Atlanta in a bout involving the WBA and WBC middleweight titles. USA Today's live coverage reported that Shields controlled the opening rounds, continued applying pressure, and knocked Scott down in the sixth. Scott's corner then threw a towel into the ring, and Shields won by stoppage. That is the visible fact. No matter what anybody thinks about the relationship drama, the athletic result is not a rumor. Shields entered the ring, fought, and won. But the timing made the result much bigger online. Papoose was present for the fight, and the Shade Room reported that he was beside Shields as she secured the victory. That meant the audience did not experience the boxing event as a separate sports story. They experienced it as the next episode of the relationship saga. The camera could show the ring, but social media kept searching for Remy. The arena could celebrate the champion, but the internet kept asking whether the timing was a message. That is how personal conflict hijacks professional achievement. The fight is about punches, footwork, preparation, and titles. The timeline turns it into a statement directed at somebody who was not even in the ring. And then came the towel. The corner threw in one towel, but the image immediately became part of the surrounding culture war conversation because Remy Ma had reportedly teased a song and visual connected to Wanna Go, with lyrics and imagery that fans interpreted as shots at Shields. The Shade Room reported that Alycia Baumgardner and Serrano appeared in the visual, making the move feel strategic to fans because both boxers have had public tension with Shields. The visual did not need to name every person directly. The casting did the talking. In modern rap conflict, the guest appearance can function like a cosign, a formation of teams, or a public announcement that the artist is no longer standing alone. Does everybody understand how powerful that move is? Remy did not simply release a song and hope people found the target. She reportedly placed the song inside a visual universe that connected her to two of Claressa's boxing rivals. That creates a layered message. On the surface, it is a music video. Underneath, it is a boxing alliance. On a deeper level, it is a challenge to Claressa's claim that she is untouchable because she is the champion. The message becomes, you may have the belt, but I can still create a room where other champions stand beside me. The second visible piece of evidence was Claressa's own public reaction. The Shade Room reported that footage circulated of Shields rapping lyrics from her Good Life track, including lines that fans interpreted as directed at Remy. Shields reportedly said she does not beef in the traditional sense and would rather let her fists do the talking, while also using language that made the audience connect the clip to the ongoing situation. This is where the story becomes complicated. Claressa can say she is focused on boxing, but if she is publicly performing a line that appears to address her opponent outside the ring, the audience is going to treat it as a response. The critics then split into predictable camps. Some fans reportedly said she was pretending to be unbothered. Others argued that Remy was the one who had turned the matter into music and that Claressa had every right to answer. Both sides are missing a point. In celebrity conflict, unbothered is no longer a feeling. It is a performance judged by strangers. The moment a person posts, raps, laughs, or responds, people examine the action for proof of emotional damage. The person is not allowed to simply speak. The audience demands a confession hidden inside the tone. The third piece was the appearance of Claressa's boxing rivals in Remy's visual. Alycia Baumgardner reportedly accused Shields of copying an outfit that Baumgardner had worn previously, including a dramatic weigh-in look and heels. Whether the look was intentional imitation, coincidence, inspiration, or simple overlap is a matter of interpretation. What is confirmed is that the accusation became public and that fans used it to connect the outfit dispute to the larger Remy conflict. Suddenly, the story was no longer only about Papoose. It was also about style, identity, athletic hierarchy, and who gets to be seen as original. This is why image matters so much in combat sports. A fighter is selling confidence before the bell. The robe, the walkout, the face-off, the stare, the entrance music, and the body language all become part of the psychological contest. If somebody says the look was copied, they are not only talking about clothing. They are suggesting that the other person is borrowing an identity. In a culture where originality is treated like currency, that accusation can be more damaging than a random insult. It says the champion is not creating the moment. She is taking somebody else's blueprint. The fourth visible piece was Papoose's tattoo. The Shade Room reported that he showed a tattoo of Claressa's name on his bicep after Shields had also previously shown a tattoo connected to him. Fans reacted with disbelief, jokes, and speculation. Some saw it as a permanent declaration of love. Others treated it like the most dramatic possible escalation during an already unstable public separation. The tattoo became a symbol because it was permanent in a story where everybody else kept changing positions. That is the reason people started using the flip-flop language around Papoose. The word may be unfair if we pretend we know every private conversation, but the public optics are undeniably unstable. When someone is associated with one long-term relationship, then appears in a new relationship while accusations, denials, and divorce news are still circulating, every public gesture gets weighed against the previous chapter. The man who once represented loyalty is now being judged by how he handles transition. And when the transition includes tattoos, interviews, public events, and visible affection, the audience sees not a quiet move forward, but a series of declarations. One person walked into a championship fight and delivered a professional result. Another person released a visual that turned rivalries into a cast list. And the man connected to both stories chose permanent ink while the internet was still trying to understand the temporary headlines. That is not a normal weekend. That is a full media ecosystem feeding itself. And oh, do I have more, because the surface evidence is only the part everybody can see. The next layer is where the emotional temperature changes. Remy did not just respond to a random athlete on a random day, and Claressa did not become part of the story because somebody on the internet made a meme. The people around them, the interviews they gave, the rivals who entered the conversation, and the way fans reacted all reveal something much more uncomfortable. To the fans who think this is just women arguing online, I need you to stay with me for a second. That argument is exactly how the deeper story gets ignored. You are allowed to believe Remy is wrong. You are allowed to believe Claressa is wrong. You are allowed to think Papoose is making the strangest decisions in public. But if you reduce the entire situation to who is jealous, you're accepting the smallest possible version of a much larger story. Because when multiple artists, athletes, platforms, and audiences keep repeating the same conflict, somebody is gaining from the repetition. And the next evidence shows exactly how the teams formed. The first piece of cultural evidence is the way the feud traveled across platforms. It moved from Instagram posts to entertainment sites, from comments to interviews, from music previews to boxing coverage. Hip Hop DX documented the early public accusations and responses. TMZ later reported that an edited 2025 clip made it appear as though Shields had claimed she fought Remy, when the footage actually came from an older moment involving Alycia Baumgardner. That correction matters because it shows how quickly a recycled clip can be detached from its original context and turned into a new headline. The edited video incident is a perfect example of the attention machine. A clip does not need to be new to become powerful. It only needs to look relevant. Once the audience believes the person in the video is talking about the latest controversy, the correction arrives later, after the emotional reaction has already happened. The first headline creates the feeling. The update merely repairs the facts. By then, fans have already chosen sides, made jokes, reposted the clip, and built a narrative around something that was not actually said in the context people assumed. That is why I keep telling you to slow down when a viral clip appears. Who posted it? When was it recorded? What was the original question? What does the full video show? TMZ reported that Shields' clip was from 2024 and was connected to Baumgardner, not Remy. The correction did not erase the fact that people believed it. And that belief became part of the public mythology anyway. This is how reputations are built now, not only from what happened, but from what enough people briefly believed happened. The second piece is the interview culture around the story. Complex reported that Keke Palmer asked Shields when she was going to knock out Remy Ma during an episode of Baby, This Is Keke Palmer. The question was framed humorously, and Shields laughed while saying the internet is not a real place. She reportedly explained that she had been focused on promoting her film and was surprised by the sudden controversy. Palmer and Shields also acknowledged that the drama unintentionally created publicity for the movie. That exchange tells us two things at once. First, the people involved understand that the story has become entertainment. Second, they understand that entertainment can be useful even when it is uncomfortable. The question was funny, but it also converted a private controversy into a recurring public segment. Once a conflict becomes a late-night question, a podcast joke, or a viral interview moment, it stops belonging only to the people involved. It becomes part of the host's content, the guest's promotion, the audience's conversation, and the platform's traffic. The third piece is the repeated appearance of Papoose inside the story's most important visual moments. The Shade Room reported his presence at Shields' Atlanta fight and described his public displays of affection, including the tattoo. Claressa's own public posts reportedly emphasized that she and her man were together while she was preparing for the fight. Supporters saw a confident champion celebrating love and victory at the same time. Critics saw somebody making a public point to an estranged wife. The same image became evidence for opposite arguments. That is not accidental. Images are powerful because they do not require a full explanation. A caption can be disputed, but a photo of two people standing together is easy to understand. It says proximity. It says alignment. It says, at minimum, that the people wanted to be seen together. The audience supplies the emotional meaning. If you already support Claressa, the photo looks like confidence. If you support Remy, it looks provocative. If you distrust Papoose, it looks like another public pivot. The fourth piece is the alliance of Remy with Baumgardner and Serrano. The cultural meaning of that visual goes beyond the song itself. Remy is a rapper with her own history. Baumgardner and Serrano are elite boxers with their own reputations. By appearing together, they created a crossover image in which music and boxing became one battlefield. Remy's conflict with Claressa could now be discussed through the language of athletic rivalry, while the boxers' previous disagreements gained new visibility through a rap video. Now, the counterargument is fair. It is possible the appearances were simply creative casting. Artists work with people they know. Boxers appear in music videos. A visual can be dramatic without being a formal declaration of war. That is true. We should not claim to know the private intent behind every casting decision. But that reasonable explanation does not erase the public meaning. The people involved knew the audience would connect the dots. They knew the timing. They knew the existing tension. Even if the goal was only art, the result was still a culturally legible message. And the final cultural evidence is the audience itself. Fans reportedly argued over whether Claressa was responding, whether Remy was obsessed, whether Papoose was loyal, whether the relationship was authentic, and whether the entire public story looked like a publicity strategy. That last suspicion is not proof of anything, but it reveals the level of distrust surrounding the story. When viewers start saying that a relationship may be a plot, they are not necessarily correct. They are responding to the fact that every public move arrives with perfect timing and every conflict produces another content opportunity. That is where the story stops being a simple feud. A diss record creates engagement. A response creates engagement. A fight creates engagement. A tattoo creates engagement. A podcast question creates engagement. A correction about an edited clip creates engagement. The public does not need to agree on the facts for the attention to continue. It only needs to remain emotionally invested. And that brings us to the gear shift. We can keep laughing at the hat, the tattoo, the outfit accusations, and the dramatic captions. We can call Papoose the human plot twist and watch the comments fight over which woman is winning. But the real question is not which person delivered the best insult. The real question is why the industry is so good at turning relationship fallout into an endless content pipeline. This is no longer just a rap beef. This is an attention business. The first systemic layer is platform incentive. Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, podcasts, entertainment blogs, and sports pages all reward material that creates immediate reaction. A calm statement about boundaries does not travel as far as a screenshot, a diss lyric, a dramatic entrance, or a headline suggesting that somebody was exposed. The system favors conflict because conflict produces comments. Comments produce distribution. Distribution produces more clips. More clips create more opportunities for the people involved to respond. That does not mean every person involved is manufacturing every moment. It means the environment selectively amplifies the moments most likely to trigger emotion. If Claressa wins a fight, the sports result is valuable. If she wins while standing next to Papoose as Remy teases a diss visual, the combined story is even more valuable to the platform. The boxing audience, the hip-hop audience, relationship drama viewers, and celebrity news viewers all enter the same conversation. One event becomes 4 audiences. The second systemic layer is narrative ownership. When a public relationship ends, each side tries to control the timeline. Who was unhappy first? Who moved on first? Who was betrayed? Who was disrespected? Who is using the situation for publicity? These are not merely emotional questions. They determine how the audience evaluates future work. If Remy is viewed as the wronged veteran, her song sounds like a justified response. If she is viewed as unable to move on, the same song sounds desperate. If Claressa is viewed as a champion defending herself, her reply sounds strong. If she is viewed as interfering in a marriage, the same reply sounds reckless. Narrative ownership is why public timing matters so much. A person who tells their version first creates the frame through which later information is judged. That does not prove the first version is true. It simply means the first version becomes the starting point. Every response then looks defensive, even when it contains important information. In this case, the early accusations, the messages, the denials, and the divorce discussion created a story in which every later event was interpreted as evidence of somebody's guilt or insecurity. The third systemic layer is the monetization of identity. Claressa's identity as a champion is valuable. Remy's identity as a respected rapper is valuable. Papoose's identity as a loyal husband, veteran lyricist, and now partner to a champion is valuable. When these identities collide, the conflict produces a tension that none of the individual professional categories would create alone. Boxing gives the story physical stakes. Rap gives it verbal stakes. Reality-style relationship coverage gives it emotional stakes. The combination is powerful because viewers can enter through whichever door interests them. That is also why the women are being judged differently. Claressa's success in the ring should not disappear because of relationship rumors. Remy's legacy in rap should not disappear because she is involved in a public separation. But the internet frequently collapses a woman's professional identity into her emotional reaction. A male artist can make a diss record and be called competitive. A woman makes a diss record and people ask whether she is bitter. A male athlete can respond to a celebrity conflict and be called outspoken. A female champion responds and people ask whether she is distracted. The standards are not applied evenly. Now let us talk about the role of Papoose. The public story positions him as the bridge between the two worlds, but a bridge does not get to pretend the traffic is not passing over it. Every public appearance beside Claressa affects the meaning of Remy's music. Every public statement about Remy affects the meaning of Claressa's relationship. Every gesture changes the temperature. The tattoo is not proof of a private motive, but it is a public act with a permanent visual effect. In the attention economy, permanence is content. This is where the nickname TMT Willie becomes useful as satire, not as a factual claim. The joke is that Papoose appears to have an unlimited supply of time for public symbolism, while the rest of the story keeps moving around him. 1 minute the audience is discussing a marriage. The next minute it is discussing a tattoo. Then a hat. Then an arena appearance. Then a song. The man becomes less like a traditional supporting character and more like a walking plot device. Every time the audience thinks the story has reached a conclusion, he appears with another symbol that reopens the entire argument. But we should not mistake comedic optics for proof of intent. We do not know every private agreement between the adults involved. We do not know whether the divorce process has been completed beyond what has been publicly reported. We do not know the full context of every message or every conversation. What we can analyze is the pattern of public presentation. And that pattern shows a person whose visible choices repeatedly place himself at the center of an already emotionally volatile story. The industry also benefits from ambiguity. If everything were fully resolved, the content would stop. If every accusation were conclusively settled, there would be fewer reasons to debate. Ambiguity keeps the audience returning. Was the lyric about Claressa? Was the clip a response? Was the outfit copied? Was the tattoo romantic or strategic? Was the fight event a celebration or a statement? The questions are the product. The answers are secondary. This is why the viewer has to become more sophisticated than the headline. The headline says Remy warned Claressa and Claressa responded. The deeper story says 2 accomplished women are being pulled into a narrative where every public act is interpreted as proof of emotion, while a man at the center of the conflict keeps generating new visual evidence that restarts the conversation. That is not the same story. And the fourth systemic angle is legacy. Remy Ma is fighting to remain defined by her body of work rather than by the latest relationship controversy. Claressa Shields is fighting to remain defined by championships rather than by whoever she is dating. That is the uncomfortable truth. Both women have more to lose than Papoose in the short-term media cycle because the audience is more willing to reduce women to the conflict around them. A man can be messy and still be called complicated. A woman is often called unstable. That is why the best move for both women would be professional control. Remy can make music without allowing the entire song to be interpreted only as a personal attack. Claressa can respond without allowing every response to overshadow the title she just won. The strongest person in the room is not necessarily the loudest person. It is the person who can use the attention without becoming owned by it. Now here is the truth bomb. The public is being encouraged to treat this like a competition between Remy Ma and Claressa Shields, but the deeper winner may be the storyline itself. The storyline wins every time Remy releases something that fans interpret as a shot. It wins every time Claressa responds in a clip that becomes searchable. It wins every time Papoose appears with a new symbol of commitment. It wins every time an entertainment outlet turns a fight recap into relationship coverage. It wins every time the audience argues over which woman is more bothered. That does not mean either woman is fake. It does not mean every move is planned. It means the system converts authentic emotion into renewable content. A real argument can become a headline. The headline can become a video. The video can become a reaction. The reaction can become a diss. The diss can become a music visual. The visual can be discussed during a championship fight. The fight can create another response. The cycle does not require a villain to be sitting in a room plotting. It only requires people to keep reacting in public. The most damaging part is that the audience may be rewarding the exact behavior it claims to dislike. People say they are tired of the drama, then click every update. They say they want the women to focus on their careers, then make the relationship conflict the most discussed part of the career moment. They say Papoose should stop switching sides, then treat every new photo as breaking news. We cannot criticize the attention machine while feeding it every hour and pretending our engagement has no effect. The fight should have been a clean professional statement. Claressa entered Atlanta with a record the public recognized, faced K. Scott, controlled the action, scored a knockdown, and won when Scott's corner threw in the towel. That result should have been enough. But because the relationship story was attached, some people viewed the win as a message to Remy. That interpretation shrinks the achievement. It turns a championship performance into an argument between two women. The song should have been evaluated as music. Instead, the casting became the headline. The tattoo should have been evaluated as a personal gesture. Instead, it became evidence in a debate about loyalty. The interview should have been evaluated as a conversation about a film and an athlete's life. Instead, the host had to ask about knocking out a rapper. Every professional achievement gets dragged back into the same emotional courtroom. And that is why Remy's warning matters. When she said, in substance, that continued mentions would bring a response, she established a public boundary through confrontation. Claressa's decision to answer anyway may have been understandable, especially if she believed her name and reputation were being attacked. But responding also accepted the terms of the conflict. It gave the audience exactly what the storyline needed, two famous women acknowledging each other as opponents. The question is whether that response was a victory. In the short term, yes, it created attention. It generated clips, arguments, and headlines. In the long term, the answer is less obvious. If the goal was to prove Claressa is focused, every response gives critics another reason to say she is distracted. If the goal was to protect her relationship, the public back and forth only places more pressure on everybody involved. If the goal was to promote music, it works. If the goal was to protect legacy, it is dangerous. The same contradiction applies to Remy. Her ability to turn conflict into music is part of her artistry, but the more the public story centers on Claressa, the more Remy risks allowing a younger athlete to occupy the emotional center of her narrative. That does not erase Remy's legacy. It means the current storyline can temporarily overpower it. A legend should be able to respond, but a legend should not have to spend an entire era proving that she still has the authority to respond. And Papoose? The permanent tattoo may have looked like the strongest declaration in the story, but declarations are not the same as stability. A person can make a dramatic gesture and still leave questions unanswered. A person can stand beside somebody and still be criticized for how they handled the previous relationship. A person can say they are moving forward while the public keeps looking backward. That is why people call him the human plot twist. He keeps adding moments, but the moments do not automatically produce clarity. So the strongest conclusion is not that Claressa destroyed Remy, or Remy destroyed Claressa, or Papoose somehow outsmarted both women. The strongest conclusion is that the conflict has exposed how quickly the culture turns accomplished women into competing characters while allowing the man connecting them to remain a source of endless suspense. One woman has titles. One woman has classics. The man has a talent for appearing exactly when the timeline needs another episode. The evidence does not prove that every move was engineered. It does prove that the public presentation keeps producing the same result: more attention, more speculation, and less focus on the work that made these people famous in the first place. That is the manufactured part of the story, not necessarily that the emotions are fake, but that the system packages those emotions into a product and sells it back to us as entertainment. And if you have made it this far, understand what the real win looks like. Claressa's strongest answer was not the lyric, the caption, or the argument. It was the sixth round stoppage. The strongest answer to every claim that she is only relevant because of Papoose is the fact that she walked into a major arena as a champion and left with another victory. The strongest response to anybody questioning her competitive identity is the footage of her controlling the fight until the other corner stopped it. Remy's strongest answer is not necessarily another insult either. It is the reminder that she built a career powerful enough for one new record to become a national conversation. The fact that people instantly understand the cultural weight of her name is evidence of a legacy Claressa did not create and Papoose cannot erase. Remy does not need to pretend the situation never happened. She needs to make sure the situation does not become the only thing people hear when they say her name. And the public should stop confusing silence with weakness. Silence can be strategy. Focus can be power. A fighter who refuses to chase every comment may be protecting the next title. A rapper who chooses the right moment instead of answering every rumor may be protecting the next record. The audience wants immediate reaction because immediate reaction gives us something to debate. But the people with the longest careers usually understand that not every battle deserves the same amount of energy. This is where the hero resolution becomes complicated because there is no perfectly innocent character in a public conflict. The hero is not whoever has the cleanest caption. The hero is the person who eventually returns to the work. Claressa returns to the ring. Remy returns to the music. That is where their power is most undeniable. Papoose can appear beside one woman or another, but he cannot become the championship belt. He cannot become the catalog. He cannot become the years of discipline that either woman has already invested in her craft. While Papoose is creating another headline with a hat, a tattoo, or a public appearance, Claressa is still training. While the internet is debating who copied an outfit, Remy still has the ability to turn cultural frustration into a record. One person keeps producing symbols. The women keep producing careers. That is the contrast the entire story has been building toward. One side is fighting to control the next headline. The other side has already built something that survives the headline. One side needs the audience to interpret every move. The other side can point to championships, music, and decades of public work. When the noise fades, the record remains. So yes, Claressa responded after Remy warned her. Yes, Remy's reported "wanna go" visual raised the temperature by placing her alongside Baumgardner and Serrano. Yes, Papoose's public gestures created another wave of conversation. Yes, the audience will continue to debate who is winning the personal conflict. But the larger lesson is that fame turns every emotional decision into public evidence. The people involved are not only living through the situation. They are also being watched, edited, reposted, and interpreted by an audience that wants the next twist before the current one has even been understood. Claressa's professional victory is real. Remy's cultural legacy is real. The reported relationship allegations remain allegations unless proven. The online interpretations remain interpretations. The media cycle is real, but its framing is not automatically the truth. And that distinction is where the audience gets its power back. Because this is only the start. Claressa still has future fights, future promotional appearances, and future opportunities to decide whether she wants to answer every outside voice or let the record speak. Remy still has music that can either continue the conflict or redirect the entire conversation toward her own next chapter. Papoose still has to navigate the consequences of public declarations while a reported divorce process and a highly visible new relationship remain part of the conversation. None of those storylines disappear because one night ended with a towel in the ring. The next major development will likely come through music. If Remy releases a full version of the record, fans will dissect every line for references to Claressa, Papoose, the marriage, and the boxing world. If Claressa answers with another song or public performance, the conflict will move even further from relationship drama into a cross-genre rivalry. And if Papoose responds again, the audience will immediately compare that move to everything he said and did before. That is the chain reaction everybody should be watching.